Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Gio and Joey Show. Hanging out with a special guest. Joey, how you doing? And introduce our guests.
I'm doing better than I deserve. This guest is a repeat guest, Coltton Bennett from Idaho. Um, so I'll let him get into this, but unfortunately, he did not win the race he was talking about last time. Um, but I will say this: the day after the race, or the day of, or I can't remember exactly when I saw it, but I saw a post, and it should be the bare minimum, but it was one of those posts that in this day and age reminded me of why we need people like Colton, because he congratulated the victor and he accepted the results of the election. That just shows he actually believes in American democracy. So again, that's so sad that that's the bar, right? Just accepting the results of the election, but he did that, and so I appreciate that. But anyway, so Colton, how's things going? How are you feeling post race? And then what's the state of that race?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here. Um, it, I'm a young man. I'm in my 20s. I'm 25 years old, and so my first bid for partisan office, it was a big deal. The race ended up being a three-person race between a deeply
Uh-oh, frozen chosen. You're frozen, buddy. All right, Joey, tackle it while we are waiting for him to unfreeze.
Yeah, so hopefully he'll come back live here in a second. But I guess my big thing is we need we like one of the things that I appreciated about Colton's run, right, is like we need a like obviously anyone who looked at it, obviously President Biden dropping out of the race, but like even Kamala Harris, and everybody's talking about she's now the young blood, but it's like she's like 60, right? Like this should be considered on the older edge, but now that's younger. And so what I like is seeing solid conservatives, right, who are younger, who are actually taking up the mantle and trying to run. And I think what he was about to say there, right, is like this three-way race, he's still, like I wonder if it had been able to narrow more than just that to a two-person race, if he maybe would have been able to pull it out.
You mentioned about Biden dropping out of the race. The more and more evidence you kind of can conjecture, it's a conjecture on my part, nevertheless, but he got pushed out of the race. In other words, right? The powers that be that actually run that party's platform basically strong armed them. The donations were drying up. The enthusiasm was drying up for that particular rendition of their party. And so they pushed them out. And I've seen memes, and regardless of whether people care for these memes or not, the party that yells about the end of democracy ended up having a person chosen that was never got a single primary vote. And the more and more I think about it, and the more and more I look at it, I think they did this on purpose. They kind of were able to hide her in the wings because Joe Biden was the president. And the clues add up. Like they had an election before, they had a debate before the primaries. Why? As the last straw to make them look foolish. And then they had this waiting in the wings. Like I say, all of this is conjecture, but it's not so far fetched that it doesn't seem plausible. And now she doesn't want to, well, I don't want to say it's only her. They don't seem to be able to agree in a debate. But I can tell you this much, Trump is not afraid to debate anybody. So if anybody's going to be afraid of debating someone, it's not Trump. He may look foolish, he may do something, but he's going to be bombastic. There isn't a camera. Former President Trump isn't afraid to be in front of. Your thoughts
I
on that?
mean, he did dodge debating every other Republican in the primary, right? And he is the one who backed out and pulled out of the ABC debate. And so here's the one thing I will say is like there's a lot of people talking about this being anti-democratic, right? The way Kamala is now going to be the nominee, even though she didn't get all these primary votes. I kind of like strong parties and parties as institutions. I think are actually kind of a good thing, right? And like the party course, like, and
Oh,
Jonah
no,
Goldberg.
look, hold on. Before you continue, it's the right choice. I mean, she's the VP. How bad would it look if you have the VP and then you don't pick her? I think it would look worse. So that's a right choice for the party. It just looks there's a way to look at it that seems fishy is all.
Yeah, no, I guess I see that, but I just think the idea that this wasn't the Democratic choice or whatever, like something that Jonah Goldberg pointed out on his podcast is like Democratic primary voters Democratic voters, right, and polls of people have been saying, right, particularly since the debate, but even before that, that like Joe Biden wasn't the best person to run, Joe Biden, and so like the party tried to protect him, right, because he was the incumbent, whatever, for so long, and then just after that debate, there was no protecting him anymore, right? Like it became clear to everyone, right? Trump, if it continues,
there we go.
Hey guys,
He's back.
I'm so sorry. I was afraid my phone was gonna die, so I had the charger plugged in, and then all of a sudden my phone blinks, emergency, your phone is overheating. So I was like, oh no. So I ran into the grocery store here. I bought a cold bag of carrots and I cooled it down.
I thought it was just frozen video, know what I mean? Like bad bandwidth. Turns out overheating. Yeah, that's happened to me even while driving. Like I may put the phone on my lap, not realizing that the sun is hitting it directly, and then things want to overheat. Anyway, so as you were saying,
where did I leave off?
You left off. You were going into how the race is going now at the moment. Once you were dropped off.
Okay, so we worked really incredibly hard. We knocked over 4,000 doors, but it was a 3-person race, and at the end of the day, the incumbent state representative, she won re-election with 43% of the vote. I got 41%, and the third candidate in the race took about 16% of the vote.
Hey, a quick follow-up to that then would be for me, had that third candidate not been there, do you think that put you over the top, or do you think that kind of helped?
We absolutely would have won.
Okay.
He and I were competing for the same portion of votes, the more conservative wing of the Republican Party. The big thing we disagreed on was abortion.
Okay.
But he would not have conversations with people. He wouldn't be willing to drop out. And at the end of the day, he got 16% of the vote. So Representative McCann won re-election, but 57% of people voted against her in the primary. And I think most people would be wise to listen to that and say, hey, there's something here. My constituents are dissatisfied with the way I've been behaving in the legislature. But election night comes, it was down to the last precincts that we were counting because the vote was so close. And as soon as they tallied the final vote, I picked up the phone and I called Representative McCann and I said, hey, congratulations on winning. Well done. You're the Republican nominee now, and I want to do everything I can to make sure you defeat the Democrat in November. And she said, thank you very much. She was like, I did not think it would be that close. Which I think anytime politicians start not listening to people, they're in a very dangerous place. So the next day, I posted my congratulations and I said, I'm endorsing Representative McCann for the general election. And in her victory post, she said that she wanted to give me a shout out because she said it was a very classy move. I was under the impression that calling, conceding, and backing the nominee was just how good old-fashioned politics worked.
It should.
But I found out I was the only candidate in all the local races that did that. So I get a call the next week, and it's a very animated and angry gentleman from a little bit south of here, and he said he wanted me to withdraw my congratulations and claim election fraud. Which is, it's interesting. There was absolutely no evidence of election fraud. It was a very close race, but everything was on the up and up as far as the count and so on. But this is where we're at in politics today, where people that don't like the result, they just claim, "Oh, you cheated."
Yeah, no, that's whack. And so congratulations to you for being and like I said, like Joey alluded while you were dropped off, it's sad that doing something that should be normal needs to be congratulated. But because it's so rare nowadays, I want people to know that you did the right thing. That's good. That's classy. And, you know, we do this, yourself specifically, but whatever else we do, we should do it with dignity and self-respect. And that's what you showed. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
Joey?
Yeah. So now just kind of moving the conversation along. So one of the big things that I know I've seen you post about, so you were at the, you were saying the Idaho State RNC convention, and
Yes.
you were a delegate to that. And then I know you had some thoughts on the national RNC convention and the platform change, the way social conservatives kind of got the shiv a little bit from the national party. So how was your experience as a delegate at the Idaho RNC? And then what are some of your thoughts? Well, let's go with that first. How was your experience as a delegate in Idaho?
Yeah, so I got elected as a delegate for my county to represent at the Idaho State Convention, and it was a great experience. I wrote a couple proposed changes to the state party platform, and I got both those passed. And one of them, the one that I wrote on abortion, was actually picked up by national news media outlets because I changed the language in the platform to say that the Idaho Republican Party is against any act which intentionally ends human life. And then I listed those. Intentionally ends innocent human life. So abortion, euthanasia, and I said the destruction of human embryos. And so several national news media outlets then ran articles that said Idaho Republicans are seeking to ban IVF, or in vitro fertilization, which is an absolute distortion of what I wrote and what the platform says. We say that we're against destroying human embryos, which is a common practice in IVF, but it's not necessary. You don't have to destroy the embryos to maintain the practice. But we're in an era of fear tactics and so on. So that's one of the things that they did. But I was really excited with the direction the Idaho Republican Party is moving. I think we're moving in a more conservative, socially conservative direction, and I was really happy with it. And to kind of jump to the Republican National Convention that just happened in Milwaukee, the Idaho Republican Party very much supports a free market. And you're seeing some changes in that on the national level, where Republicans are moving more towards a populism and away from the free market economics of Ronald Reagan. And I find that disappointing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's one of those things where it's almost like we've forgotten the roots, right? Like, in other words, because I think both people, like, people can get it wrong, right? When they think like we're saying we're for free markets, right? That's because all we like is the corporations. Like, no, like read Hayek, read me. Like, it's not about that. It's about the fact, the dignity of the individual, right? And the individual has a right to the product of his labor, right? It's all about human dignity. But swinging it back to abortion, first of all, I'm glad to hear that the Idaho party did not follow the lead of the National Party, which basically came out and said that as a national party, all they're against is late term abortion, which I think like listen, and this is what I want to get your point on, because like we're all here very much on the hardline pro life side, right? And like we would say we don't want to compromise our position. But on the flip side, what the people who will defend the change in the platform will say is, listen, Republicans are being crucified on this issue. Like I know, like here in Michigan, like basically every ad that I saw in the 2022 midterms where our governor was up again was abortion, 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 abortion. My thing was always just like, let the party just not run on it, but don't lie, right? Don't say we're now for early abortion. Just maybe don't emphasize it right now. But how do you see that? How should Republicans run on this issue? And how should
Yeah.
they bring it up?
So, a couple things. First of all, what we saw at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee was nothing short of moral compromise. The Republican Party has been the pro life party for 50 years, since Reagan. And all of that was stripped away. And ultimately, on this issue, this is something where we are going to stand before God Almighty and answer, where did we stand up and fight for the rights of little human beings who had no one else to defend them? But obviously, there's some wisdom in not introducing yourself to independent voters in a general election. Like, hi, I'm Colton, and I'm running to get rid of the rape and incest exception. That's just foolish. That's not knowing your audience. That's not articulating in a way that's winsome. But the idea that Republicans are just getting crucified on this issue isn't exactly accurate. So, in all the states where ballot measures have gone on to enshrine abortion so called rights into state constitutions, Ohio, Michigan, places like this, Kansas, the pro abortion crowd has outspent the pro life crowd, uh, sometimes as much as 10 to 1 in the ads that they're running, in the campaign efforts that they're putting on, and so on. And so when they outspend them 10 to 1 and the vote comes out and it's 45% to 55% or 42% to 58%, that's actually a very close election for one side not putting up any money. And so my call to conservatives in this regard is, don't run from the issue, step up and communicate it, because you're being outspent 10 to 1. The other side is communicating, but we're being silent on the issue and shy about it. And I really think if conservatives had put their money where their mouth was, those races would have been a lot closer, and I think we would have been able to prevail in some instances. But we were outspent on average 10 to 1.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Like I said, every other ad that I saw in Michigan when it was Tudor Dixon running against Governor Whitmer, right? Every other ad was abortion, the anti-abort or the pro-abortion people saying like, "Oh, they're extreme, we're extreme." So like, I definitely see that. But
But we didn't push back in all those states. Ohio is a prime example. The pro-life side did not counter with what our message was, and so people only heard one side.
so I hear that, and I would be, like I said, I would be supportive of an effort if we could get that money to do it. But I guess I would say maybe a more practical question is like, assuming that the polls are correct, our position, right? Like I said, I think a majority of Americans do oppose late-term abortions, but I think my position and your position, I do still think is a statistical minority. And so
Yes.
I guess my question is, how do we go about actually convincing people? Right? Because in other words, in order to get a durable, like Brian Anderson was talking about this, is like we should pass the most pro-life law that can withstand challenge, right? And that's not just going to be wiped away and then have a worse abortion regime. So like, how do we actually go about changing minds on this issue, right? Because like, I don't think that with our current constituency, we can actually win on this. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's just a matter, like you were saying, of spending more. But like, how do we go about actually changing minds on this issue?
No, so it does vary state to state. So where I'm at in Idaho, there's an approach that's going to be completely different than when you're at where you're at in Michigan. Two easy ones that I think we can go to is, and I had encounters with voters like this in my district, because my district is a purple district, it's a swing district, is taxpayer funding. Okay, you believe that abortion should be legal, but do you think the taxpayer should pay for it? And most people will say no. And then second, late term abortions. So, okay, you think abortion should be legal, but 20 weeks, 30 weeks? And most people will say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And then I'll point out, but that's the position that the Democrat Party has embraced. So for all this talk about extremism, there's an extremism that's very present on the other side, and it's not like people are trying to meet in the middle. The Democrat Party is off the rails on this. They want late-term abortion on the taxpayer's dime, and so it's got the message has got to look different depending on where you're at. So if a voter in Vermont is going to be very different than a voter in Idaho. And we need to pass the most pro-life law that we can.
I think where well, I don't want to say mistake because I don't know how everybody approaches it, but I would love to see more educational videos. You know, I change my mind the more I am educated on a subject. And so I don't think we use in this day and age with all the social media we have and all the great content creators, I think we need to show more and more what an abortion looks like in video. Because I've seen people do videos where they walk up to people in New York City and show them on an iPad what an abortion looks like. And once they see that, many of them didn't realize what a baby looks like at 16 weeks or 20 weeks. And then how, you know, they're tearing their limbs off and crushing their skulls and pulling them out. You know, it sounds grotesque, but sometimes you need to be confronted with that stark reality of what an abortion really is to perhaps begin to change the narrative. My thoughts. Your thoughts on that, Joey, Colton, either of you?
I think that's a good idea. I guess now then the question goes, how do we get that funding that Colton was talking about before? How do we get? We got to convince some conservative donors, right? The Peter Thiels of the world to put some money towards this. That would be great.
Imagery is one of the most powerful assets of the pro-life movement, and it was for the abolitionist movement too. So you had people like William Wilberforce and those that surrounded him, that the famous depictions of the conditions on the slave ship, how close together people were chained while they were transported across the Atlantic Ocean, or even the picture of the man who's chained. It says, am I not a man and a brother? That kind of imagery, it pulled at the heartstrings of people. It held their consciences accountable. And it's definitely one of the strongest assets for the pro-life movement.
Speaking of that, so I was at a YAF conference 2 weeks ago, and there was a speaker there, Bert Folsom from Hillsdale. He's a historian. And he was talking about John Newton and how John Newton, a slaver who ran slave ships, and then he ended up encountering the gospel. And after encountering the gospel, first he started changing conditions on the ship, and then he just realized, like, I have to leave this, and this is abhorrent. And he's basically the guy who, when he wrote his book, right, describing what he would do and the way they would treat people and how they would just, you know, randomly, like when the ship was, you know, going through stormy waters, to just throw men, women, and children overboard because they just viewed them as less than nothing. And when he started explaining that ended up waking up the church. And the way he talked about it is how basically the 1700s were the era of abolitionary philosophy and theology and stuff. And then the 1800s was the century of the law catching up to the philosophy, catching up to the culture. And so maybe it's just to Gio's point, and to like maybe we just need to get our churches and we need to get the Christians in the country to actually view this issue with the moral weight that it has. And then once that happens, the culture will change such that the law can follow.
Yeah, because
You're
I can't see somebody looking at that and what the reality is of that, and not be moved unless you are so far gone that you no longer have a conscience. Go ahead, Colton.
no, you're absolutely right, Joey. And so often the church today makes terrible arguments when it comes to the pro-life movement. So I'll give you one of the most famous ones that we hear all the time is, well, I'm against abortion because you might be killing the next Mozart or Beethoven. You might be killing someone who could grow up and cure cancer. But that's a terrible argument because it says that we shouldn't do something because someone might be able to grow up and do something really, really good. No, the reason abortion's wrong is because human beings are made in the image of God. And so it doesn't matter if that child is going to live 10 minutes or 10,000 years. It doesn't matter if
Mm-hmm.
that child's going to grow up to cure cancer or live their entire life in welfare. They're a human being, and
Mm-hmm.
killing human beings is wrong. And so when it comes to the church, we need to make sure we understand why this matters. We're not against abortion because we want to save the next Mozart. We're against
Mm-hmm.
abortion because we believe killing is wrong.
Killing of innocent life, because I believe in capital
Yes.
punishment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and just
Yeah,
war and so on.
yeah. So let me
So
ask you, uh, where do you see your political career? Is this one and done, or do you want to continue to stay in politics and run for office, or just you may be more successful behind the scenes? Post this election cycle, what are your thoughts on
So
that?
I'm currently an officer on the Latah County Republican Party. So um, I do have some involvement in politics still, even if I'm not running for public office.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see for the for the near future, making sure that we get conservatives elected in November and
Mm-hmm.
beyond. That's my job. That's what I'm going to be focused on. Um, as far as what the future holds, if I'm ever going to run for public office again, I don't know. What I do know is that even if you don't win, running for political office as a conservative and bringing attention to these issues actually pulls your opponents to the right.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw that. I saw my opponent's voting record change when she was being challenged. I saw the other opponent, the guy who got third, I saw his language about different things also shift because he was being challenged on it. And so you don't winning is great. I would have loved to have won,
Mm-hmm.
but you can also shape culture in other ways. So I don't know what the future holds. I have a lot of really good ideas as far as legislation, but I don't have to be the guy to write that. So we'll see. I don't know. In the immediate future, I want to get conservatives elected or reelected.
All right. So when you become governor of Idaho, though, don't forget Gio and Joey. Okay.
Oh,
Deal. Right. We
deal,
got a deal. All
deal.
right. Joey, go ahead. Jump in.
So moving it back to the state of the Republican Party, and because I agree with you, right? First of all, we need more Reagan caucuses. So an Idaho Reagan caucus, we'd love to see that happen. But no, in all seriousness though, and like, how do you? So obviously we've got an election coming up, a actually my election, our Senate primary in Michigan's tomorrow. Um, but we got a general election coming up. We have in my opinion, one very, 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 very progressive candidate, right? This whole Republicans for Harris thing, like, makes my
Oh my
skin
goodness.
crawl because her voting record, like, literally in the Senate was to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, I
So, like,
know.
I don't know. I don't see how you can be a Republican and support her. But at the end, I'm also of the opinion that the Republican nominee, in my opinion, is not ideal. That's all I'll say for today on that for today. But what do you see about the state of the race? How do you think things stand, like, going into November? Do you think that the Trump campaign is taking the right tact in its way of taking on Kamala, who I think is a target-rich environment? How do you see the state of the race currently at the national level?
Yeah. So in the primary, I voted for Ron DeSantis. Um, I in the past 5 elections, primaries and generals that I've participated, I've never voted for Donald Trump. I am going to break that and vote for him in November. Um, I'm not binding anyone's conscience in that regard. I think I think he's a very deeply troubled and flawed candidate and man. Um, for me, the stakes are just too high, and I don't see a third party candidate that represents my values sufficiently. Um, as far as what I saw most recently with the former president and his attacks on the vice president, calling her a very low IQ individual, things like that. If that's what you're referencing about the approach that he's taken, I feel like, do you ever just look at the state of politics today and say, what is this, middle school? Like,
Yes,
that's,
I say that all the
that's,
time. Yeah, I miss the
well,
civility of yesteryear. Look. There's a lot of people I disagree with. I don't have to be rude about it. I could just tell somebody you're wrong, right? And but be polite about it.
absolutely. So I look at those kind of things, and I understand trying to throw red meat to your base and so on. I also think it's petty, it's immature, and it doesn't speak to voters like me. And I put a lot of thought into this to decide where I'm going to vote, how I'm going to vote, how that is going to shake out. A lot of people like me who maybe didn't vote for Mr. Trump in the primary, they aren't going to put that same level of thought. They're just not going to vote, and he has to be responsible for that. When Nikki Haley dropped out of the race, she said Donald Trump has to earn the support of my voters, and insulting Kamala Harris is probably not the best way to do that. I say that as someone who's decided to vote for him, but it's not a good tactic in my opinion. I think it's immature.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question here, because I've been talking to this with friends. What about the notion that we've gotten to the point where we're voting really not for who's the top of the ticket, but for the platform, and that should help persuade someone like Joey, who is never Trump, into voting for the platform.
I will say I'm
Go ahead.
not never with the trademark thing, right? Like, I've said from the very beginning, there is something that he could do. I think it's vanishingly impossible that he'll do it. But like I said, like, even the policy things I disagree with, like the populist economics and stuff. Like, listen, I'm totally on the board of policy wise. I think a Trump administration was better and will be better than Biden, Harris, Shapiro, whatever. But for me, it was, if he were to come out and say, I lost the 2020 election, right? It was, Biden got more votes than I did. I lost. I treat January 6th was a bad thing, and I treated Mike Pence like shit, right? And like, if he would come out and say that was wrong, I'd vote for him in a heartbeat. I see him doubling down on the opposite of that, and for me, like I said, I totally understand, like, why people who don't like him, a lot of them are still going to vote for him, because, like I said, you look at the left, you look at what they've got, and it's awful. But I just wanted to throw that in there. I'm not exactly never Trump like the way people think of never Trump.
All right, go ahead, Cole.
No, I get that, and I think Joey's one of the voters that I was talking about earlier. That if Republicans want to bring those people out, they have a responsibility to earn and court their vote. And
Yeah,
I look forward.
but back to the question, and Colton,
Yeah,
you can go next. Is have we moved beyond? Should we move beyond the fact that we're not just voting for the top of the ticket, but the whole platform, like Joey alluded to? I mean, do you really want to go far left? Who's
I think I think there's a lot of reasons that people can break and vote the way they do. So Christians that live in progressive cities, for instance, like Chicago, they're when they go to vote, they are not voting for a conservative. It's just not going to happen. Sometimes they're voting for the lesser of two evils. Sometimes they're casting a protest vote where they're saying, whoever's not the mayor, that's who I'll vote for. And so I think there's lots of strategies that people can employ to vote for a particular candidate in a particular way. In 2020, my wife voted in the Democrat primary because in Washington State, where she lived, Donald Trump was the only name on the ballot in the primary. So to be able to have any influence, she could either vote Trump or nobody, or she could vote and make a decision between Biden and Bernie Sanders. And so I think there's lots of strategies that are appropriate to employ in how you decide to vote. At the end of the day, I I think there's too much on the line with a Harris presidency to do anything different. But I will say this: I do think we need to look to the future because we need to be asking ourselves the question: do we want the Republican Party 4 years from now to be the party of J.D. Vance or not? And if you're like me and you have real hesitations with that, then we need to be making tactical decisions now, or this is just going to become the norm.
Yeah, I agree with that. We can't hear you, Gio.
Speaking of Harris, and you brought her up, uh, I don't like the whole notion of Trump attacking her on her race. She used to be Indian, and now she's black and low IQ. There's plenty of policy issues to go after with her. If you were the Republican nominee, how would you attack Harris?
I'd vote for him.
Well, first of all, a couple things. One, I'm too young to be running
No,
for
I know.
president.
Yes, yeah. You got to be
Two, if I
35,
were the
folk.
Republican nominee, I would have picked Nikki Haley for VP. And three, you got to make it about policy. So the Democrat Party is the incumbent party, and we have an open southern border. We have inflation that's through the roof because we mailed everybody stimulus checks like 3 times for money that we pulled out of thin air. We have groceries that we can't afford. We have international crises and a presidency that has taken a weak posture in the world. Go there. Go there. Because it is the Biden-Harris administration. And Kamala Harris promises a continuation of those policies. You don't have to insult someone's intelligence to simply say, we've given your ideas a shot for the last 4 years and they don't work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joey, you want to jump in?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, this should be the easiest race to prosecute, right? Like, Kamala Harris has said, like I said, now she's running away from it all. I don't believe her for a second, but like she has advocated for a mandatory gun buyback program. She has advocated for, abortion to the point of up to the point of birth, right? She's advocated for all of the most radical policies, and I'm not seeing any of that like out of the Trump messaging. I see some surrogates talking about that, but like that should be, I would think, if you want to win this election. And I don't know if you saw the recent stuff out of Georgia from the Atlanta rally, but as attacking Brian Kemp. Brian Kemp, first of all, Georgia shouldn't be a swing state, but it is. And Brian Kemp has the best ground game in the country, right? Like, and he's endorsed He's endorsed the former president. And so why would you attack this great governor other than, and this goes to the reason why I can't, in my opinion, and again, if with my conscience, can't vote for him, is I think it all comes back to the 2020 election, and Brian Kemp wouldn't say that the election was fraudulent in Georgia. And so because of that, even though he's endorsed Trump, even though his ground game is needed, right? Like if the Trump campaign is going to do well and is going to win Georgia, which they need to do, right? Like they need Brian Kemp, and yet he's attacking Brian Kemp. But I can stop attacking Trump now because there's plenty to attack with Kamala, and I'm definitely more anti-Kamala than I'm anti-Trump. That's for sure.
Well, go ahead. What about the argument that if a vote for neither is keeping the incumbent in office?
Yeah, so I will take this one. I fundamentally reject the binary choice narrative. Listen, I think that every single person, I think voting, right, it is, I don't want to say a sacred act because that, that has other implications. Like, it is the most important thing that we do as citizens. And every single person is responsible to God for how they steward their vote. And I think you have to be comfortable with your conscience before God for how you vote. Listen, I think that there are plenty of good people who are going to ultimately pull the lever for Trump. I understand the reason why they would, and I respect that. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people who can't pull the lever for Trump who also aren't going to pull the lever for Kamala. And I just think this idea of who you're not voting for, like by not voting for someone, you're actually voting for someone that you didn't vote for. It's like, no, you vote for. I don't know if that feedback is on my end or not.
No, it's coming through Colton's the car radio.
Okay, all I would say is you vote for who you vote for, right? And so, like, if you don't vote for Trump or Kamala, that's not a vote for Kamala. That's a vote for neither. That means neither of them earned your vote. That's the way I look at it, anyway. But like Colton? I said, I also will push back against the idea that I'm not voting because I will absolutely be voting, and I'll be voting for a lot of Republicans, just not one of them.
All right, Colton, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I have a question. Are you voting third party or are you abstaining?
I'll probably write in. I haven't decided who I'll write in. Maybe Condoleezza Rice, maybe Nikki Haley. I don't know. But
so I did a lot of thought on your decision. And Michigan, you should look up the law. Michigan is one of those states where they only count write-in votes if the write-in candidate filed a declaration. So some states, they count any write-in vote. Rhode Island is one of those. Alabama is one of those. Michigan is not. The candidate has to have asked for their write-in votes to be counted. So you might consider that piece of information, because then if you're writing someone in, it's essentially an abstention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is my top, I actually didn't know that specific thing about not counting them. But the way I look at it is voting for somebody who's not going to, if it's not Trump or Kamala are going to win, right? And so no matter who I write in, I realize that that's basically an abstention. As long as my votes down ballot get counted, that's what I'm most concerned about. Like I said, I'm really hoping that we can get a Republican to replace Debbie Stabenow in the Senate, and there's I think a lot of races there that I care about. But
are you going for Justin Amash, or
I am not? I'm a Mike Rogers. Mike Rogers.
Mike Rogers. Huh. Okay.
Justin, he's a little. I like him.
Is it foreign policy? Is that your beef?
That's
okay.
He was running for Congress, and that was what I was voting for. That'd be one thing. But the Senate is, it deals with the foreign policy of the United States, and Amash has been. I get it on a personal level because he has family that's in Gaza, but I don't think I think he's been bad on Israel. I think he's just in general bad on foreign policy. He's too isolationist.
Speaking of which, foreign policy, let's ask Colton. What are your thoughts on what's going on and the escalation that seems to be happening with Iran? If you were in the hot seat, right, with the little red button there at your disposal, what are your thoughts there on what's happening there?
So that yeah, I I take a different approach when it comes to Middle Eastern politics and um, historic, well, say the Bush administration, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, in that I don't believe that establishing a parliamentary democracy through 20 years of warfare in the Middle East is beneficial. Um, but I also don't believe that taking no action on the world stage is healthy either. And so there are times that you need to strike, and you need to strike hard,
Mm-hmm.
and you need to show people that the United States of America doesn't mess around. Um, that's one thing that I appreciated about Donald Trump previously, is I knew that when he hit our adversaries, he was doing so with the intention of communicating strength and not necessarily trying to change an entire system of culture. And so I am concerned with the escalation that we see in the Middle East. I'm concerned with what we see with Iran. And I think that the Biden administration has made clear their weakness on this point through their lack of desire to stand up to our adversaries around the globe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as far as what I'd do if I had the red button, I don't know. I think the
I'm
person who
just
has the
kidding.
red button probably has more information than me.
Yeah, just kidding about the red button. Yeah, no, I'm remembered. I'm reminded of the Reagan speech about appeasement, right? And the whole notion where he mentions in that speech that some people take the 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 position of better red than dead. You know what I mean? And I've been called an isolationist, and I don't think I am, but I'm more of the type, and I can see though why people call me an isolationist, because if I were president, I wouldn't be having public conversations. They'd all be back channel, and when I move, it's going to be a show of strength. In other words, talk small and carry a big stick. You know what I mean? And if people want
Teddy
to see
Roosevelt.
that, if people want to see that as isolationist, I'm not big much about. See, because here's the thing: if you draw a line in the sand publicly and they cross it, then you look weak if you don't stand up to the line you drew in the sand, right? And when we come to the Middle East, a lot of those cultures are about saving face. And if you can let them save face while getting your point across, whether you like them or not, and whether it's true or not, that little viral clip that went around where supposedly Trump told the guy, if one American hair gets hurt, I'm going to, kill you. And he showed him the satellite picture. Obviously that came out after the fact, but that's the kind of attitude behind the scenes we should have while letting them save face publicly. And I don't know, your thoughts on that, Colton, and then Joey.
No, yeah, I think there's a level of appropriateness there. There's a ditch on both sides of the road. There's people
Mm-hmm.
that want to they want to do nothing in the world, and then there's also people that they go to cultures that have existed for 2,000 years, and they say, let's set you up with a central bank. Well, come on, guys. We
Mm-hmm.
can we can spend 20 years there and be no better off than we were. But I'm a believer in strength, but it's not necessarily our responsibility to spread democracy around the world.
Joey, thoughts on that?
So I agree with Colton, right? That I think the neoconservatives of the early 21st century made some errors. I agree also that we can't go like our foreign policy can't be that we're going to establish Madisonian democracies everywhere, right? That's just not
Mm-hmm.
something we can do. I will say, in defense of the Bush administration, first of all, some people forget this, but George W. Bush actually became a neoconservative after 9/11. And the reason is, and again, sometimes people I think are unfairly critical of President Bush. The neoconservatives were the only people in the administration that actually put forth a plan for how we were going to deal with the war on terror, right? And so that plan, in my opinion, had some flaws. Obviously, some major flaws. But I think sometimes some of the attacks are kind of like, it's how after the fact, right? 2020 vision is perfect, right? So I'll say that in their defense. But no, other than that, I do agree with you, right? We can't go everywhere, right? Listen, I think Iraq. Now, it can be argued was like once we went into Iraq, the mistake was just leaving and allowing ISIS to form and all that. But I think sometimes when that stuff gets brought up in regards to what's happening now, I don't think it's applicable, right? Because like we don't have to establish a parliamentary democracy or Madisonian democracy in regards to Israel versus Iran. Israel is a democracy. Israel is a strong ally, and so for me, I think defending Israel and supporting Israel is nothing like going in and trying to establish a democracy in Iraq. So for that, and then the other thing I would say is like, while we can't establish democracies everywhere, I do think that there's a moral component to. I think our foreign policy should favor democracies and should favor free societies, and so like, or free people, right? So, for instance, I think the way really every administration, Trump, Biden, the Bushites and the neocons treated the Kurds, I think is just abysmal. Here we have a people who every single time that America has asked for their help, they've readily to do it. And then what does Trump say as we're leaving? He's like, well, we needed the Kurds, but now we don't. I'm like, no, like, yes, it's true that we can't fight every battle, but also I think morality should be part of the conversation, right? And like, I'm not like a utopian, like, whatever, but like, yeah, I think standing up for people who have stood up for us, I think is moral and right and good. And I think if anyone deserves a state, right, it's the Kurds of northern Iraq. But I digress there. I don't think our disagreements are that far apart.
No, I'm 100% with you on the Kurds. I am not a Pete Buttigieg fan at all, but I did agree with what he said when he said that the thing that makes us be able to work with people around the world is that the patch on our shoulder means something, and if you take that away, you might as well come for our body armor next, because if your word doesn't mean something, that there's a serious problem. And so I agree 100% that the way that we treated the Kurds, that's a moral issue for me, and I think it was wrong.
All right. Well, let me jump in here, Joey, because I have a meeting at 7, and I know Colton has a limited time as well. As far as November 5th, put on your prediction hat. Two things. Who do you think wins? Is it close or a landslide?
Incredibly close. I think Mr. Trump ekes it out.
Okay.
But barely. I don't think we'll know on election night.
Yeah, that's,
I think,
I don't know why I remember that elections used to be decided sooner. Like, what are we like digressing here, or am I misremembering?
So 2000, of course, we didn't know for a month.
Yeah.
2004, we didn't know till about noon the next day. So, but other than those two, yeah, most elections you knew that night.
Yeah. And we're in America, for crying out loud. Can we get this done sooner? All right. So, go ahead,
I was
Joey.
going to say, your prediction. Who do you think's going to win?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, I think it's going to be Trump, but it's going to be close. Very close. Like perhaps even bringing out the hypocrites in the Democratic Party with challenges in the court and stuff like that. That's how close I think it's going to be.
What do you think, Joey?
Yeah, I don't think Trump's going to win. Just because, like I said, I don't, because I see a lot of people saying like Michigan, they think he can win Michigan like he did in 2016. I don't see it given how our recent elections have gone. I don't see him winning Michigan. I think his actions in Georgia, I think it's going to hurt him. And then also Arizona, right, with Kerry Lake as the Senate challenger, right? Like, I think, like, I agree with you guys both. It is going to be a very close election. I guess if I was putting money on it, I would say he probably loses because of these missteps. But we will see. I'm not going to on it because
hey, how's about we have you on after the election again?
maybe we'll
I'd
do
love that. That'd be fun.
Yeah,
here's what
yeah.
we should do. Do a special Tuesday night election night stream. That'd be fun.
All right, and we'll invite multiple guests. All right, Colton, thank you once again for taking time out of your busy day. Sorry it didn't go your way, but thank you for your work there and helping establish Republican causes, conservative causes. I don't want to put them as Republican per se, conservative causes that uphold human dignity. So thank you once again.
Thank you both. Thank you all for having me on. Have a good one. God bless.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.